start brainstorming now and then blast through 2 episodes after,
We could.
We
That is
because
also
could.
we've already
I
burned
also
through 30
think
minutes.
I think we could just do it. I think we just go into it.
I mean, it's already being recorded, so I don't know what to tell you. As you saw from our last episode, I'm not sure if Jesse did, but if you saw from our last episode, I didn't actually cut it. I thought about it and I just didn't.
and then
And that's
no, I
content.
need to go back and watch.
It was
That's
really funny.
content. Um, my coworker said he really liked the comment down below if you made it this far. Is tell us if you like bologna or not, kind of thing.
Did he comment?
I don't think he did, but he liked it.
Can you tell me he's fake?
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, that's also the guy that rolled his ankle. So I'll just put him down. I'll kick him in when he's
Oh,
down.
same guy. Okay,
Same guy.
well,
And now it's on the podcast. Now we're talking about him on the
Unless we
yeah,
podcast.
cut it, but we
you
never do. Uncut and unfiltered.
isn't that an actual show?
Not trademark, not a sponsor.
Yeah, it is a show. I think it was on Animal Planet.
Right, right. It was when animals like were brutal.
Yep.
Yeah, I stopped watching that pretty quickly. I like animals being these beautiful, majestic things that just exist for me to look at briefly.
All narrated by David Attenborough.
Either that or Morgan Freeman, but
Yeah.
just for penguins. Okay, I'm sorry. Can you imagine making one of the best-selling documentaries of all time and not using that narrator for any other nature documentaries?
No, but that's what they did.
That's what they did.
hmm
And like I used to have the beginning of March of the Penguins memorized. There's no place colder on Earth, and even fewer places that like life can survive. Like, and it's just this beautiful like beginning joyous thing for penguins and talking about how brutal their lives are. Never again. I don't think he did any. I'm looking it up. Anyway, we can start the podcast. I'm just mad about that.
Hey, you said penguin
That's
though? Hold
valid.
up, hold up, hold up.
You
Dude.
have a penguin.
Dude, it's a penguin.
Oh my word. Okay, so welcome to the UMR in Summary podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Jesse B. from Cornell College. And with me I have,
Nathan Dozier, who apparently is actually super uninformed. Uh, there's a top 20 of Morgan Freeman's narrations.
I've always thought about going into voice acting, but my name's Dallas Anthony's. I use him as pronouns. I'm a hall director at the at North Dakota State University. I was gonna say the University of North Dakota State, which is wrong. Um, doesn't matter.
okay.
Actually, doesn't matter. Keep going.
Wow. Okay, so today we're going to talk about supervising and advising because we all do both, I believe. Is there anyone that doesn't do both?
There you go. That's your
See
answer.
none.
Great. So I have a bunch of questions for y'all about this topic, which I came up with in the last 10 minutes as we discussed other things.
No, you can't. You talked to me about it like last week.
Yeah, you've been ready for this for a month.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for making me look good.
Of
Yeah.
course, yeah.
Appreciate it. Okay, so my first question is, what is the difference between supervising and advising as defined by both of you?
Am I getting interviewed right now by my institution?
Right, this is the go-to interview question.
It's so interesting. Because like, do you want to start? Wait, is that you?
I don't want to. I'm gonna close my ears so I don't hear your answer. So then I don't give the same answer and go,
Hmm.
oh, So if we say the same thing, we say the same thing, but it's not being based off of your merit. So hold on.
Well,
Okay.
I think I have, and I was gonna say you can listen because I think I have just a small comment and then you can go into a larger comment. But I think it's really interesting because like yes, the terms themselves are different because the English language and definition. But I think in the roles that we do, or the work that we do, the sector that we're in, higher education, um, I think they're almost the same thing. Almost. I view it as, and I won't go into specifics yet because I'll let Nathan. Nathan, please take your hands off your ears. But no, I view it as a like Venn diagrams.
Yeah.
I view supervising and advising as like Venn diagram, but the outer edges where there's not the same things are almost like you can't see them almost.
Mhm.
I think there's just so many similarities at the core of what you need to do to then be successful at doing either. I'll get into it, but I want Nathan to speak and I want him to listen to us. So I'm gonna yield.
Great. Nathan, it's all you.
Sweet. I don't know. You said also I learned that my hands are a little creaky. So it was like creaking as I moved my hands a little back and forth. Couldn't hear anything. So my view on the difference between supervising and advising is I'm pretty sure for advising it either way I'm a little hands off because that's how I am. I like making it so people kind of sink or swim by themselves. Um, Not because I'm lazy, even though I am a little, but mostly because I know that in my experience, having heavy-handed advising and supervising just doesn't work for me. Um, so knowing what works for me, I apply it to others, which also probably isn't fair because some people need more hands-on and other people don't. But that's just the difference of supervisors. But the way I've done it is advising for me is I really only interject when they need me 100% because I want them to be able to make their calls. I want them to be able to, if they're planning programs, I want them to be able to do that pretty freely. I don't want them to be afraid that I'm just going to say no to everything. And I really only really interject when it's like that's really not possible or that's just not in the bylaws because that's important to like student government and things like that. Just like actual need me to do something or need my advice on something. They will usually ask for it. Supervising for me is more of I have to observe and then bring it back to them. So it's less on the need me basis and more of what I need basis. So when it comes to supervising, there are things that I expect. When it comes to advising, there's things that they expect.
That was good.
You know,
Yes.
I really like that actually.
Sure.
Um, I since you weren't listening to me, didn't
Yeah.
say anything because I said I was going to let you speak first. I just had a small comment I wanted to say, and then I wanted you to go first, and so I kept trying to tell you to stop doing that because I wasn't going to say much prior to you speaking.
You
Um,
did make a statement though.
I made a statement,
He said
but
the skills and the foundation of both are the same.
Hmm.
yes, which doesn't. I mean, like it kind of gets into the next, I guess we where we're eventually going,
Mhm.
topic wise or question wise, looking at our stuff. But that's why also I want to hold off because Jesse, if you have things and ideas you wanted to talk about initially, we would love to hear that as well.
Thanks. Wow. I mean, I think my thoughts are very similar to you both. Like, yeah, the skill set needed for both is very, very similar. If you can do one, you can typically do the other, although I think that they are acted out differently, like Nathan said, where one is I have expectations for people, the other is they have expectations that they communicate with me. Um, yeah, and I really think that is the primary difference where advising is a less active, more, I'm gonna kind of steer you in a direction if you need it, but you have the initiative to move forward versus supervision being, here's the direction. Like I'm pointing you somewhere. Now you go. Yeah, so I think that's my thought.
Yeah. So I've been, for context, because I've had a lot of growth and learning in the realm of supervising and advising. So this is my sixth year of supervising, in some capacity. And this would be I advised as an undergrad. So this would be like my seventh and a half year advising, uh, in some capacity. And I used to always take the approach. I'll start with the advising world because I think supervision, like yes, there's definitions, like I said, there's definitions of both the words because that's how English works. But I think supervision is very I think you can blueprint advising for the groups each
Mm.
year. Now, obviously, it changes depending on what your team is and like what positions you have filled and what you don't, the structure and who needs what. But I think advising is much more blueprintable than supervising is. I think supervising is a person by person basis
Yeah.
with figuring out like knowing what your collective goals are, but how do the individuals work to as the cogs in the machine to make it all work. Okay, so I think supervising is very individualized, while advising should be, but doesn't have to be, depending on how you approach. But I want to start with advising because I feel like I've had the most change in that world throughout my 7.5 years of doing it. Um, I used to be, I used to agree with the philosophy that one of my past mentors had when it came to advising, which was the hands-off approach. Like, you come to me when you need me, I'll be in that space and I will assist when needed for your growth and development. And I used to have that philosophy for a long, good chunk of time. I'd say a good like my first like 4 years of advising or so ish. It all blends in my brain. But I'd say like the first half of my advising journey so far has been the hands-off approach, because a mentor in my past said something along the lines of, "You've had your time in the sun." Okay, because I feel like a lot of higher ed professionals get into the roles that we get into because we had so much fun in our undergrad doing the stuff that we basically were doing as students in this world. And we said, oh, now I want to get into this work as a professional because I enjoy it so much. And that's awesome. And you need and to enjoy a job is fantastic because that's not the experience of everyone on earth. But so enjoying what you do is awesome. But some people will get into these roles and think, oh, it's just going to be the extension of my experience as a student, which it's not, because now you need to develop and grow your students. You can't just also have the fun all the time. You can't just, oh, we're planning events. I'm gonna go and enjoy it, and that like you need to be that professional figure in that space. And so that was always like that was what my that was my like my philosophy initially was like I've done this already. I don't need to keep doing this. I'm there to provide the insight and perspective because I've done what you guys are trying to do right now already. So why do I don't need to actively partake because I've already done it. You guys are choosing to now want to actively partake, so I will allow that for yourself. And that works. It does. It works if you are there as a resource and provide perspective and insight. It works for the students. I've seen it be successful. What I learned, though, at least in the advising sector, is the more hands-on I became as I've gotten a little older in my journey, the more my students have appreciated me in that space. I've seen that as I'm actively like if say we are brainstorming ideas for an event, for a hall event. In the past, I used to just kind of like I'd let them brainstorm, even when an idea came up and maybe I already knew it wasn't going to work because 2 years ago the team tried it and it didn't work. I'd let that team brainstorm and try to think like process through like how can we make this work? Because that's learning and growing and developing right there. Um, because you learn through your failures, and even though your past team failed, this team doesn't know that failure yet, kind of thing. Okay. So I used to just like let it happen, brainstorm, take the 25 minutes, even though I know like in hindsight that's gonna be wasted time because like I already know it's not gonna work. But um I've learned that like if I'm actively participating in the brainstorming and like giving my ideas and like saying, well, oh, we done this like 2 years ago, so why don't we try something else? Or we do a lot of craft nights, so why don't we try a different thing? And I'm giving my ideas, and I'm like, oh, as an undergrad student, 10 years ago, I did this in my undergrad. Why don't we try something like this here? Because I haven't seen it yet. I've been here for 4 years. I haven't seen that here yet. Let's try it. I've noticed that my students are much more engaged with the conversation when I'm actively engaged myself.
Mm.
And so I've moved away from the hands-off approach. I'm very hands-on with my Hall Gov, my advising style, because I've seen just uh, like how much again it is appreciated by my students. I know everyone is different when it comes to how they interact and build rapport with their students, whether they're their staff or just student leaders. But I'm very big on rapport building. I'm very big on being approachable, personable, being like that, like I try my hardest to not make it like I am a supervisor, I am an advisor, but like I've never liked um the idea of supervisor, supervisee, advisor, advisee. Like I try to break that barrier as much as I'm able to be more of a I'm here at your side. I'm not here like it's like that picture where like you have the leader that's getting pulled by their people on like the wagon. Like I'd rather be like pulling the wagon with them rather than them pulling me kind of thing. I'll find the photo after the podcast that I'm referring to, and I'll we'll put it. I don't know. We'll put a link to it in the comment. I don't know. But yeah. So I guess I've rambled a lot just about advising. But yeah, I'm very hands on now, just because I've noticed just how much more successful my teams have been when when I'm in the dirt with them, rather than just letting them be in the dirt themselves. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think I agree with that for sure. I think are a lot of like studies, books on leadership that say that's how you do leadership well. Um, so I guess I want to amend my statement. I don't know that I would say advising is just essentially hands off, but I would say advising is you guys have set a direction. I'm going to help you stay on track. Whereas supervision is you're coming to a direction that I am setting. Um, I think that maybe feels like the difference. So, like, absolutely, you can actively participate in advising in those conversations, giving ideas, all those things. But you are not setting the agenda for them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. I think yeah, like again, this if you are a new professional looking for guidance
Mhm.
in both of these worlds, yeah, I think the blueprint that you can give yourself to try to kind of learn how you should work and manage yourself in these like situations would be what you just said, Jesse. The whole like I'm gonna use hands off and hands on again. I know that's not the best phrasing for the conversation we've already had. I'm gonna use it again. Like yes, advising can be more hands off because again, it's they're choosing to be in these positions. It's voluntary. They're going to learn and develop through it, et cetera, et cetera. I do feel like supervising is more hands on as the supervisor because at the end of the day, there are like in a hall gov world and an advising world. At the end of the day, if people don't succeed, like reach their goals, it's not the end of the world. Like if you set a goal for like we want to do 7 events in a year and you do four, you still did four and that's fantastic.
Mhm.
Now, in the supervising world, if you say, I'm going to interact with residents 7 times, you only interact with them four, okay, that's a little different. You know, how can we get it to the seven? Because that's what we need you. We need you to do like once a month interactions, whatever, let's just say for an example, and you only interact with them 4 months out of seven. Okay, that's different. Okay, let's be more hands-on there and like actively give you support and the resources and the guide there to get you to complete the task that you signed a contract to do.
Right.
So like I at its core, at its base, when you're just learning and just stepping into a role like this, yes, like you should be more hands-on and like assisting and helping as a supervisor because um I think one of my coworkers said something like this recently, and I really do agree with it. And I don't think I've ever put it into words. And so when she said it out loud, I was like, this is right. Um, when your supervisees fail, um, it's more on you as a supervisor than when your advisees fail. Like you as an advisor, you do what you need to do. If your advisees fail, it is what it is. It's not more on you. It's more, I would say it's more on them,
Mhm.
honestly. They didn't do the work kind of thing,
Right.
unfortunately. But when you as a supervisor have supervisees that aren't doing the tasks, like yes, it could be their output and their ability to do the
Mhm.
tasks, but I view it more as the supervisor needs to do more to make sure their supervisees are succeeding because
Yeah.
that is what a supervisor needs to do is make sure that their team is completing the tasks that need to be completed.
Yeah, I agree. Nathan, do you have thoughts?
I think the way I kind of like interpolate, because I kind of go back and forth on this, of there's always a limit because you can only really overstep so much without giving people the opportunity to learn the why.
Mm.
Because if you basically give your experience and say this didn't work and this is why it didn't work, they'll hear that, absolutely. But I'm not sure if they'll understand that because failing yourself is very different than hearing someone else failed. Um, and fail is maybe a strong word anyway. When it comes to like RHA, for example, if an event doesn't go well, that doesn't mean you failed. You put on an event, you had student attendance. Fail is a strong word. It didn't go the way you wanted it to is different than it failing. Failing would be nothing worked out, no students attended, people complained about it. That would be a failure. And that typically doesn't really happen because we have smart, intelligent, wonderful students who want to be in those roles, who want to see the success of other students of the university and things like that. For me, when it comes to the advising role, the reason that I do more hands off is because I can use my experience to tell students why things didn't work in the past, but that doesn't give them the firsthand experience of understanding how things work when they do or don't. So and that's the thing. There are two right ways to do it, is more of what I'm saying. There's not a right way or a wrong way necessarily. It's really adaptive to who you have. Because, for example, my student government knows way more about student government than me. So me being hands off in that space is me learning. That's not me. That's not me
Mm.
saying when I was in student government, this, no, I don't know what's going on. I just figured out how allocations work this year, and this is my third year advising them. And then I didn't know that they forgot to put me on meeting agendas. I just thought that they weren't supposed to or something. So then this is my first year having their agenda open as the advisor as the meetings are going on. I was just listening really intently and taking really diligent notes so that I could talk about it during our next meeting with just me and the president, vice president, and the other advisors. Um, but when it comes to like RHA, there's kind of a limit there. And for the record, I think our RHA, I do believe the hands-off approach was incorrect. I do believe that there were things that just had to get a little more heavy-handed because of the fact that right now we don't have an RHA because me and the co-advisor were being a little bit more hands-off. And then it wasn't just that events weren't really firing, it's also that students weren't engaged in general. And we did try to interject a little bit more when it came to the brainstorming and things like that. But I don't believe that that's where the disconnect was. And I believe it started to come more from just overall want to be there. And that's probably where it's just like if the people who are here don't want to be here, that's okay. But we need to be a little bit more forthcoming with those. And there were students who did want to be there, but it was kind of the few outweighing or the many outweighing the few. So currently we're on a little bit of hiatus before we bring it back. And then when we do that, we're basically making a huge like overhaul, as you said, blueprint of like how we need to be very intentional about that approach too.
Mhm.
Um, so unfortunately, I think it comes down to which, I mean, everything in the job is going to come down to situation and what the organization is and what they need and what their experience is. If you have a pretty experienced organization, they probably don't need you to really railroad them. They need to be guided when needed. When you have an unexperienced organization, they need the tracks laid and they need to see what the plan is day one, or else they're also not going to be successful.
Mhm.
Great. This is a very robust discussion.
It is. It's very, very complicated because it's just so situational.
Yeah.
So situational and based on personality. And that's kind
Yeah.
of the next set of questions that I have. And we're almost out of time. So maybe we should make this part a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess I just want to know, how did you guys form these approaches? Dallas, you already talked about it a little bit, that you had a supervisor that told you this is what we do, and then you kind of have changed your approach since then. But what has formed your approach to advising and supervision, and how has it changed over the years?
I can go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I did touch on it a little bit already. I definitely when I was a newer professional, base my um how do I word this? Just like how I did a lot of the things I did, whether it's supervising, advising, or just everything, on the individuals that I interacted with in the past, my supervisors, my advisors, my mentors, whether I liked them or not, I took the good from the good and I avoided the bad from the bad. And I kind of morphed philosophy from there. As I said, like I learned the hands-off approach from a mentor in the past for advising. Um, I will say with supervising specifically, because I talked a lot about advising and not a lot about supervising. So I guess I'll lean more there when it comes to like how I've formed where I am right now. Um, this goes, what I'm about to say goes back to the fourth episode of season one, when I talked about Nathan asked me, how do you do so well interacting with people, Dallas? And I said, oh, I just do it. And I know that's not a good answer, and it never will be. Because, and ironically, I wanted to be a teacher in my past life, and I don't think that would have worked in some cases. Regardless, um, I do think some and this there you can learn how to supervise, you can learn how to lead a team, you can learn that, you can gain the skills and the traits through experience, yes, but I also do have a strong belief that some people are just naturally gifted to be in the roles of a leader, and some people are more suited for those supportive roles. And it doesn't mean you are better or worse than the other people around you. That just means we all are different and are unique and have our traits and skills that make sense for the positions that there are.
Mhm.
Now, so with supervision specifically, I don't know. I guess maybe, and now I'm just like guessing. Maybe this is why I do the things I do. I have no idea. I'd have to reflect and come back to you. But in the moment, I will give an answer. I think the biggest thing that I do subconsciously as a supervisor to try to be a good supervisor is if I was one of my students, how would I want to be treated from me? You know, the platinum rule, maybe it is like treat people how they want to be treated, kind of thing. I don't know. Regardless, um, I think I truly do every year try to figure out, okay, who am I working with? Like, yes, I have the historical context. Yes, I can use similar processes, and like if I'm using like a Google Drive, my Google Drives like logistically look the same most years because it's worked. But I've always set up a space for constant feedback, 360, me giving it to them giving it to me. Of what do you need from me? I will let you know what I need from you because that's my job. But it's not their job as a supervisee to tell me what they need from me at the end of the day. They have tasks assigned from me that they have to complete or their contract because they're getting paid. Now, I think if we're flipping to advising, it's different where like I think it is more like what can I do for you, not what can you do for me kind of thing. I think it's flipped in the advising sector. But with supervision, it's more like you need to do stuff for me, and and you could find success just cutting it there. You could, and like that's awesome if that works for you when you're trying to develop kind of who you are as a supervisor. But I am very big in I want I want to create a space where people feel comfortable to openly communicate like their actual needs, and I adjust what I do accordingly. Almost like every other meeting, I will bring up just like, hey, for example, I'll use a specific example now. Again, go back to the Google Drive. I will always remind my staff that like yes, I set up this Google Drive that has the resources that they need to be successful, but I'm not using it as much as they are in the academic year. I might refer back to it to find some things just to make sure people are doing what they need to do. But when the year gets started and I'm doing my task and they're doing theirs, they are using the Google Drive. I'm not in there as much. And so I always like will like say, hey, as you've been working, as you are doing stuff, as you realize there's more things, support, whatever you need, like how can I adjust this Google Drive or the way I do a staff meeting? Like there was one staff 2 years ago that said we would really like printed agendas because they wanted to like write down their notes during staff meetings. And so for the rest of my staff meetings that year, and even though it was only like two people that said that, I did it for everyone because it could be people just aren't voicing what they want because some people just don't feel comfortable in that space to do that. I would print off agendas and I would have a little like notes section and just an empty box so they can write down like what do I need to do from this staff meeting kind of thing. Um, Now, as a supervisor, as like a default, I don't print off staff meetings. I have the luxury of my staff meeting is in the classroom in my building. I have technology, so I just put the agenda on the screen kind of thing, so I don't need to print off. So I only do that per request. But once someone requests it, whether it's one or all eight of them, I will do it because I just took over supervision of another staff because we had a coworker, hall director that got a new job at a different institution. Congratulations. And so I'm taking over that supervision of that staff. There's 14 of them over there. And so I brought up, we have something called intentional interactions where people need to intentionally interact with their residents. I think that's pretty standard across most institutions. Um, so the previous supervisor tracked who was getting what forms were already submitted on a document that was like externally seen by everyone. And I've never done it that way. I've always internally tracked it because I've never wanted the whole like, oh, that person has more submitted, so they're better than me, or I submitted more than this person, so I'm a better RA. I've never wanted to create that culture. And I'm not saying this past coworker did that at all. I'm just saying that's how I viewed it. And so I brought it up with the staff, like, does this work do you guys like that you can see what forms have been submitted for who from everyone kind of thing? Like, do you like that? And some people said yes, but there was one person that spoke up and said, I don't actually appreciate that because it makes me anxious with my form submitting. And I said, perfect. We're not doing it. And yes, like that is serving the minority, not the majority. But I do feel like in that situation, it made the most sense because if it was harmful to one person, eventually, I bet you there's other people who just didn't want to speak and it was harmful to others. So I don't know. I've just learned as I've grown. That's a terrible answer, and I've rambled, and I'm gonna stop talking. Thank you so much for listening. Yep.
Learning as you grow is a great answer, actually.
But
I
but like for the sense of your question of like what tips can we give people for this? My tip is you're gonna learn, baby. It's gonna
That's a
happen.
great tip. Trust the process. Nathan, what do you got?
Uh, my tip for advising is figure out what the needs of the students you're advising are. If they seem pretty unsure, give them a lot of advice. If they seem pretty sure of themselves, then let them either thrive in that or fall in that, and that's okay. But make
Mhm.
sure to pick them up. Um, when it comes to supervising, I'm not sure if this is advice. I don't think it works for everyone. I think it works for me specifically, and it may work for people in a similar position to me, which is a very specific position of I have a lot of staff members who I've known for a really long time.
Mhm.
I have a staff member who I supervise who is in my wedding. So I'm just in a weird situation, and it'll probably form how I'm a supervisor moving forward. But that advice is regardless of how serious, how hard, and how rough the conversation you have, if someone does misstep and needs to be corrected, there is no joy in giving someone more grief or hurting someone any more in the situation than they're already going to hurt themselves. Don't dwell on it. Don't make it so they feel like they screw up and they're never going to fix it. Like, let them know that it's okay and everyone does mess up, and that's part of being a professional and growing. My personal philosophy on it is giving all the information you need to while minimizing harm.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I
Jesse,
think
what's yours?
mine. Advice or supervision style?
Both.
I mean, I think rapport building is the most important thing to me. Making sure that I know how each of my supervisees, this is for supervision. I'm not actively advising right now. I have in the past. Um, more on like a short term level, but I think I would say that the same thing for advising or supervising is just rapport building. Because when you have to have the hard conversations or you have to say, um, I love that you're having all these ideas, and also I think that's not going to work. Um, those conversations are made a whole lot easier when the students know that they have a foundation of relationship with you, that isn't going to change. That I guess just communicating, I see you as a person, um, before I see you in your capacity as either, my employee or my advisee. Um, and I recognize that you have dignity and value just inherent to who you are. And that's not going to change even if we have to have a hard conversation or I have to tell you that you need improvement in a certain area. Um, and that looks really different depending on who you're working with. So I have supervisees that want to talk a ton about their personal lives and wanna get my input on personal things. They'll ask for relationship advice or um talk about family stuff, that kind of thing. There are others that they want to have just the bare minimum. We're just talking about the job, and that is like how we build trust is I'm checking in on how they're doing with the job, and that's kind of the end of it. Um, and I think for me, my tendency naturally is just to go towards I want to know, everything about your life that you'll share because I value you as a person. And so I've had to learn to kind of temper that tendency to ask all the deep questions and just kind of let them lead on that. But generally, the more trust that we can build that um, I'm a safe person and you're, I'm not going to see you any differently or any less in situations where you've messed up or we need to talk about improvement. That tends to be the biggest thing for me that I have found works. So,
There's something I want to add real quick. I know
yeah.
we're getting there. But yeah, I agree where I too as a supervisor am very big on like I want to know like all the ins and outs of everything if you're willing to share.
Mhm.
But that's why to temper to make sure like the students that I'm working with understand the space and like what it's meant for, like a one-on-one space, for example.
Right.
I always say with new student staff, and I will remind as the year goes on when I need to, I always say something along the lines of, because the people will always, students will always ask, like, well, what am I supposed to share in these one-on-ones? Like, what do you want?
Mhm.
What am I
Right.
supposed to happen here? And I always respond, um, I will listen to as much as you want to share.
Yeah.
So like that means we're just talking about the position. We're very transactional. I think that term works really well. If people want to talk about the
Mhm.
job, very transactional meeting, and that's fine. Like if
Yeah.
that's how we are finding success in this
Mhm.
space, awesome. But some people will take that as like, okay, I'm going to tell you everything. I'm like, oh, awesome. That's great. Just also know that if you start saying things, then I'm like, I'm gonna refer you somewhere else.
Yeah.
But it's yeah, I've always made a baseline of like I want you to share with me how whatever you feel comfortable sharing with me.
Mhm.
And like that goes off of rapport building. If they feel like we have a really good rapport, they'll start sharing more things. If it's more like a he's my supervisor, I'm his supervisee, I'm gonna talk about how I did an event last week and it went well. Perfect. I'll see you next week. Kind of thing. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. I think one other thing that I'm going to add, and then we can go into our next thing, but uh, this is something that I'm working on. I think I'm not always great at it. And it doesn't, you have to be careful about how you do this for each supervisee or advisee, but John Gottman, I believe, is a um, marriage therapist and researcher, and has found that in marriage relationships, but in relationships in general, and I think this is true of the supervision or advising relationship, you have to have a pretty intense, I can't remember exactly the ratio. I think it's 5 to 1 at least. Ratio of positive comments to negative comments, to keep um, someone feeling valued in the relationship, to keep the relationship feeling safe. And so that's another thing that I try to accomplish with my supervisees and advisees, just like making sure they know what they're doing well, so that when I have to say there's a thing that needs to be improved, they again have that foundation of, this doesn't mean I think you're doing a bad job or you're a bad person. This is one thing that needs to be improved in the midst of all of these things that you're doing really well. So,
I have two things to say real quick, and then I know that we need to cut for time. The
yeah.
first one is all the things I said about supervision. I want to make pretty clear that I supervise exclusively full-time staff, so
Mhm.
it's a different experience. I know that student staff need a very different thing than full-time staff do. The second thing I wanted to say is I'm going to use that advice, and I'm going to have a notebook that just has tallies of positive to negative for every single supervisee, and there are going to be no other notes about our one-on-ones.
LOL. I don't know if I
Oh,
would
you're
advise
so
that.
smart. You're so handsome. Remember that program?
That's
That's
not what I meant.
exactly how I took it. No, no,
Oh my gosh.
nice shirt. No.
What? Have to be a little more profound than that, guys.
Yeah, maybe.
All right. This has been the In Summary podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Like, follow, subscribe, all the things. Find us on social media.
We're
What?
forgetting the most important step of this process.
In summary,
Oh,
make
sorry.
sure you're utilizing your experience and utilizing your supervisees' wants and needs and your advisees' wants and needs to be successful and to make them successful.
Thanks, guys. This
Of
is why we need
course.
you.
No, that's why we're here.
All right. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Boo-boo-boo. Boo-boo-boo.